Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to another episode of Manifesting Muslimah. I'm your host, Zara Pedersen. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about the delay. We're going to talk about divine timing. We're going to talk about qadr. We're going to talk about, some big topics. But ultimately, what we're going to talk about is you trying to rush what Allah has already preordained. You trying to rush Allah to adhere to your timeline, to your deadline, to your idea of when something is supposed to happen, rather within your own world rather than in Allah's world. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about today, and I'm just going to go straight into this topic. And I'm going to start off by reading you the first ayah from Surah An-Nahl, the bee, because that is literally the inspiration for today's episode. Okay, so the first ayah in Surah An-Nahl says, "The decree of God is at hand, so do not seek to hasten it. Holy is He and exalted far above what they associate with Him." Okay, that is the first ayah. The decree of God is at hand, so do not seek to hasten it. And by the way, the decree is what Allah has decided upon, what has been preordained. So what Allah has decided will happen regardless. That is basically what we would also consider like the qadr, right? And we've spoken about qadr before. I should probably make like another episode around the whole like qadr thing, because it's quite a while ago, and we're coming up to like 100 episodes here on Manifesting Muslimah, the podcast. So I should probably make another episode about this. But the qadr is something in and of itself, which we're not going to go into today, but hopefully in the future there'll be another episode of this. And if you can't wait for that, go back in this episode. There's a lengthy episode about qadr. And what he's saying is that it's already at hand. Basically, we can't stop the decree from happening. But what he's also saying is, do not seek to hasten it. So don't try to rush it. Don't try and make it happen before it is time for it to happen. That is what is being said here. It's happening. You can't evade it because Allah has decided it. But you also can't rush it. You can't force it to come before it's time. And I've spoken before about this, but again, quite a while ago. I really need to, keep coming back to certain subjects and like re-mention it just for like people who are new here, people who haven't gone back, people just for reminders' sake and all of that good stuff. Because, but you know what the truth is? There's so much that I want to speak about. And so I'm always like, another subject. And then I kind of get distracted. And sometimes I need to go back to some of the good classic reminders that we all need from time to time. And one of them is, especially when we're talking about law of attraction from an Islamic perspective, is that we can quite often get stuck in a timeline. We can quite often get stuck in what we perceive to be deadlines for certain things to come into our lives, the blessings. So we'll ask Allah for something, and in the back of our head, we have got an idea of when we want this thing to happen, right? We've got an idea of like, but it has to happen before this, before I'm this old, before that thing happens, before I move to that place, before whatever. We'll have a certain, like a deadline, a time frame within which we would prefer the manifestation to happen, the blessing to come into our life. Now, this is in and of itself is normal. Like we will all have this, okay? It's the rarest of us who's like, it'll come. Whenever it comes, it'll come. Like, most of us will be like, but it would be great if it could come now. Most of us are like, but for it to really have an impact, it should really come kind of like sooner rather than later. And most of us kind of create goals and make du'as because we want to see it in the near future rather than in like a late future, other than, of course, like du'as for the hereafter and things like that, But we would prefer that the things that we ask for come with haste, that they come quickly to our lives. And that's a human thing. There's nothing wrong with this. And we all do this to an extent. But what we need to do is surrender back the timeline, the when. When is it going to come in? That's not for us to say. That is not for us to say. That is for Allah to decide. And He has already decided. Even before you made the dua, He knew you were going to come in and make that dua. He still wanted you to make that dua, but He needed you to make the dua, and then He put the things into motion and started planning. He planned before, of course, as well. But, it's such a strange concept sometimes to talk about and sort of like to say in a way where you don't sound absolutely ludicrous. But I trust you know what I mean when I say, like He knew it before it happened, and yet He needed you to do the thing, and then He could make it happen. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say. And it sounds weird, but you know how you know God. Girl, you know Allah, you know how He works, okay? You know his limitlessness in this dunya and above. So we need to surrender it back to Allah. We need to be like, it would be great in my little nafs, in my ego, in myself, to be like, if it could come within this time frame. It would be great if it could come tomorrow. It would be great if it could come next week. Actually, next week is a little bit too soon, but next month I'll have my crap together, and then it'll be good if it could come along. We all have these kinds of thoughts, but this is when we need to practice the art of surrendering it back to Allah. We need to say to ourselves and really, find peace in saying, but if it is not meant when I think it is supposed to be, if I'm trying to speak, if it is not meant to come when I think it is meant for me, then I will take it whenever it is right for me. I often see a lot of you messaging me, commenting on my posts. I've spoken to a lot of you in private about marriage, and a lot of you are like, but I'm getting older, and I'm just like. But do you believe that there's another person for you out there? Do you believe that Allah, is good with His promises and things? And yeah, I do. And I'm like, well, who's to say that you're not going to get married when you're 35, 38, 42, 47, 54, 64, And if it's meant to be at that point, we can't hasten it. We can't rush it. And I know a lot of you are going to be like, oh, but I don't want it to happen that late. You do if it means that that's the way that it's going to come in all of its blessing, and that you will meet the partner that will elevate you to the status in which you will enter a higher level of heaven. We don't know what it's going to come like. We know that it's going to come with the blessings, because if Allah ordains it and it is good for us, then He will only bring it to us in ways where it'll benefit us, right? And then we can get caught up in like the timeline of this dunya. But I don't want to get married when I'm that old. I want to what if I'm lonely? What if I don't want to be alone, and I want to have children, and I want to this, that, and the other. Trust in Allah. Tawakkul. Allah's got it under control. Allah knows what He's doing. You don't. No offense, sis. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not, coming for you here, because I don't know what I'm doing either. But I trust that Allah knows what He's doing for me. And so I rest on this knowledge. So even when I feel like I need to have something in a specific time and place, and it's not coming, I have to surrender back to Allah's will and be like, oh, I was clearly sorely mistaken that this was the right thing for me. Okay, let me get back to like the reconnection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and figure out like, okay, what are my next steps if this is not the next chapter of my life? And then move with the flow of Allah, move with the energy of Allah, move with the intention of Allah, and plan with the intention of constantly coming back to Allah. And if at any moment any of us start swaying a little, diverting a little, moving sideways, upside down, whatever, in circles, then I hope for all of us that Allah comes in and is like, I'm not going to give it to you, because this is going to move you away, like further away from me. And I want you to have it in a way where you move closer to me. I hope that Allah does that for all of us. So, trust in Allah's timing, right? So here's one thing that I do want to speak into, because what we can do is rush it. We can actually rush it. Allah says, do not seek to hasten it. like this is what he says again in Surah An-Nahl, the very first ayah. Do not seek to hasten it. He doesn't say you cannot hasten it. Okay, so let me explain a little bit about this, because this is where it gets really interesting and where we need to be very, very careful with what we're doing, okay? Because when we try to hasten something, when we're trying to rush a blessing into our life before the blessing is the correct one for us, before it's the right time, we can do these things. And Allah will permit these things to happen, okay? Not all the times, but sometimes. Allah will permit whatever to happen. Okay, this is why sometimes bad things happen in the world, because Allah says you've got free will. If you want to do bad things, I'll allow you to do bad things, but just know that there'll be a punishment in the hereafter for you, right? So Allah will also allow us to rush things into our life, even if He said it's not your time yet. You're not ready for it. We can still insist and force it to be. Let me use the example of marriage again, because again, this is such a popular topic for a lot of us. I'm going to say a lot of you, because I'm not really there yet still. Okay, so that's a real big topic for a lot of you. So if you say, but if I'm not meant to meet somebody until I'm 47 and I'm like 25 now and I just want to get married, like, here's the thing, here's what you can do. You can, and I wouldn't recommend this, but this is what a lot of people do. They rush it. They rush the marriage. So they start settling. They start negotiating with themselves, with their non-negotiables in a partner, with the family values, religion, politics, finances. This is why personal belief here from me, if you're not tired of those already, why there's a lot of divorce, because a lot of people rush into things. And hey, girl, listen, don't feel some type of way. I'm a divorcee myself, and I can now, looking back, see all the red flags that I chose to ignore when I was being courted by my ex-husband. Because I chose to ignore it, because I was like, okay, cool, let's go for it. And even though there was parts of me that was like, I'm not so sure it's like the right time, whatever, I still went ahead with it, because I was like, I guess it's the right time. I guess I'm the right age. Like, okay, cool, let me go for it, kind of thing. Okay, and I also thought I loved him. I mean, of course, that also plays a role. But still, that's a discussion for another day. But the point is that I've also been there myself. I'm a divorcee myself. I'm not proud of it. Not at all. But I can also see where I rushed into things and where I negotiated on my own values, morals, ethics, things like that I shouldn't have to do. You don't have to negotiate with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with the blessings. That's not the point of Allah blessing your life. Of course, you're going to get your blessing in a dunya, within the dunya limitations. So you still might have to work with your husband on certain things. You might still argue, all of these things. But ultimately, the whole thing should feel like a big blessing, not a big old test and struggle and, like really dragging yourself to put one foot in front of the other. But if we're rushing something, Allah might still permit it. He'll be like, okay, like I'm trying to tell you it's not the right time, but you're not trusting it and you've got free will. That's the whole test of this dunya. So I will allow you to marry somebody else. I will permit it. Go ahead, do your thing. I mean, but Allah knows it's not the right one, because it's not the thing that He decreed for you, the blessing that He wanted for you, the thing that He preordained was like, this is coming for you. This is going to be good for you. This is happening. But you want to rush it. You want it to happen right now. So you can go ahead and create your own version of it. It's just not going to be as perfect as the one that I have for you, but I'll allow you to try. I'll allow you to learn from your own lessons and mistakes and whatever. So He'll permit it, but it's not going to work out for us, or it's just going to be a struggle for us, and it's going to create more stress and anxiety than just all those good feelings that we ultimately want from, well, most, if not every aspect of our lives, right? So you can hasten it. You can absolutely force things to come before they're ready. That's what free will is for. And free will is a powerful thing. It's a powerful thing because at any moment you can decide. You can just decide, nope, I'm doing it this way. Nope, I want it now. And Allah, as gracious as he is like, okay, have it. Go ahead, have it. I'm not going to stop you. You have to come to me willingly. I'm not going to chase you into your bad mistakes, you know? So he's going to let you do the things. Or you can rest in that assuredness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can rest in the knowing that the thing has been decreed. And you will know. And I think this is the thing where a lot of you get really impatient is you're like, but how do I know? I want to know now. Like, how do I know if this is the right one? How do I know? And like, I get it. I've been there myself before. I wish I could give you like a clear answer of like, okay, so if the color is this and you pee on a stick and then two signs come, like, it's not going to be like that. It's not going to be that concrete. It is an intuitive calling. It's an intuitive pull. It's a gut feeling. Sometimes there's a bit of a leap of faith involved. Sometimes there isn't. But ultimately, I always describe it as like an illogical knowing. You can't explain, like, you can't always explain why it makes sense. It just does. It just does. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't operate in our limitations and our understanding of what is logical and what isn't. Because Allah sees beyond that. And so sometimes he'll put something our way or a desire or whatever in our hearts. And it doesn't make any sense. It's completely illogical. But yet, you know, just chasing down that dream or that desire is where your rizq is at. And getting in tune with that, like training yourself to really understand that part of you is such a valuable gift. Such a valuable gift, and really one that is so important to curate. It takes a little bit of time, it takes a little bit of trial and error, but it's so worth it. But it ultimately has to start with your relationship with Allah and your trust in Allah and Allah's plan above your own. And not just in theory, but in practice as well. Meaning, and this is the hard part, my darling, and I know this, letting go. Let go. So if Allah takes everything from me today, like, while I hope he doesn't, you know, I'll still be okay because I've got Allah. Look at all the people of Palestine, that they're still praying. They're not losing their hope. They're like, they have come to the ultimate part of their test where Allah is taken and taking and taken and taken from them. And they keep turning towards Allah. May Allah reward them in this dunya and in the hereafter abundantly. So that is the kind of relationship you want to have. You want to have a relationship with Allah where even if everything you prayed for Allah is like, I'm not going to give it to you until you get to heaven, that you still, at that point, have to be okay with it. You still have to find a way to be okay with it. It's the surrendering. It is truly the surrendering. And it's being okay with the things that you don't necessarily understand, with the things that in this dunya might be really difficult to come to terms with, especially now with social media, where we can see everybody's business online and we're like, oh, we're constantly comparing and everything. But if you are at that point of that tawakkul, oh, miracles happen. Miracles happen, and your intuition and that connection with Allah thrives. And it becomes easier for you to lean into that so that you don't feel like, how do I know if this is the right thing? How do I know? You just know. You just know. And you'll follow without questioning it. Okay, look at the prophets, alayhim salam. all of the prophets were tested beyond logic. Beyond logic. Could you imagine if you had to go through any of the tests that any of the prophets had to go through in their times? And they just had to follow blindly. Just trust that Allah was going to take care of it. Noah had to build a whole ship, a boat. I don't know if it's a boat when it's that big, a ship. I don't know, and he had to try and convince people that a big flood was coming and the rain would never stop, and he had to gather the animals, and he had to do all of these things, and he had to leave. I believe it was one of his sons he had to leave, or was it his brother? I believe it was his son. Forgive me. I don't remember specifically, but I think it was one of his sons. Had to leave one of them behind, and he just had to trust. That's Allah's way, and he did. It's not because it was easy, but because he trusted in Allah more than he trusted in his own judgment and in his own logic. And the people around him, their logic. Can we say the same thing today? Now, I know that it's so difficult for us sometimes to put it into comparison with prophets because they feel so far above us. But we have to remember that the prophets are also human. They're also human with free will. They just are beautiful, wonderful people, of course, or were. But they also had free will, and they could have said no. And there are in the Quran several examples of the prophets questioning Allah. Can I please save these people? Can we do it differently? I don't know about this, whatever. And Allah has to come in and say no. You just gotta trust me. You just gotta trust me. Just don't question it, because they're still people. And so when we're looking at it from that point of view, it becomes a little bit easier for us to also be okay, but they're also human with free will. I'm a human with free will. I'm also in this dunya. They were in this dunya. And they loved people. They wanted to save people that couldn't be saved. They wanted to do things that weren't written for them, or that felt impossible for them. And yet they just followed blindly, and they became some of the most revered people in this dunya. Right? Is it revered? I think it's revered. Me struggling with my English today. I'm so sorry. But again, that's just to tell you that is an example for you to know what you should be striving towards, right? It's not to say that you should strive to be a prophet, but to have that same level of tawakkul and surrender to Allah, where if Allah said to you tomorrow, and he came to you in a dream, was build a boat, it's going to be a big flooding, right? Would you go out and build the boat? Would you go and build the boat? If Allah says to you, quit your job and start this business, will you quit the job and start the business? If Allah says to you, he's not the one, trust me, something better is coming, will you leave him and trust that something better will be coming? That is how much surrender and tawakkul you need to have in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because he's constantly communicating with us. He's constantly trying to guide us and direct us in the right places. And we're the ones who are getting in the way of it. And so if you're sitting there and you're saying, but I've been making this prayer, I've been making it. The decree of God is at hand. So do not seek to hasten it. Say your dua. Surrender it back to Allah and trust that it'll come in his divine timing. Don't try and rush the thing to come if it is not meant to come. Trust, take action in tawakkul. Take action in that trust, in that surrender, in that faith, in Allah. Take action. So with every action that you take, it is towards Allah. Even the little things like doing laundry. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's a real thing. Okay. But yeah, so if you're sitting out there and you've been I've been making this dua for such a long time, I've been praying for it for such a long time, and you're feeling hopeless, Allah's already got you. He's already answered you. It is at hand. Don't worry. It's coming. It is coming. Just trust that when it's coming, it is the right time for it to arrive. and it was never, if it had come a moment sooner, it would never have been as good as when it came exactly as the time when Allah ordained for it to be. Okay, my darling, that is where I'm going to leave this episode. I hope that there was something beneficial in there for you, hopefully a little reminder, something for you to calm yourself with, to go into the next dua with a little bit more ease, rather than that stress and anxiety that we sometimes can walk into the dua with that like sense of urgency. And know that Allah's got you. Allah's got you. He loves you. And He loves you because He chose you to be His servant. So He wants you to have the good things in this dunya and in the akhirah. And just trust in His timing. It is as simple as that. Okay, my darling. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today. I hope I'll see you on Thursday's episode, inshallah. But until then, my darling friend, please don't forget to live in love.